I have been dealing with a very personal, moral dilemma. It's very serious. Whether or not it is unethical to abandon a book halfway through. I can't figure it out. I don't know if it's bad, if it's good. There's pros and cons on both sides. I've done the research. I'm here. We're going to talk it out. We're going to talk it out. We're diving in today. So, I started to realize that this was an issue sometime in 2024. Actually, I think it was all of 2024. I struggled with this whole book situation because what ended up happening was I'd look over on my nightstand and I had three, four, five books piled up, literally like in order of the first one that I started reading all the way to the most recent one that I picked up off of my bookshelf. And when I'm looking at this pile of books, I'm realizing that, back in 2024, I'm realizing, like, why do I have five books piled up over there? Like, why don't I just have one? Like, what's happening here? And then I'll look at the book all the way at the bottom and I'll be like, yeah, well, I started that one and three chapters in, like, I'm super bored, but I'm going to finish it one day. I'm going to force myself to finish it. And then the second book, it's like, oh, well, I was really into that one, but it was a self-help and it got really heavy and I was craving more of like a story, not necessarily to learn about all the things that I'm not succeeding with in my life. And so I needed something less heavy. And then, like, I'll look at the third book on top of that and be like, well, I picked that one up when I was sick of the self help book. But this one, I got a few more chapters into it, but still, it was just like, you see what I'm saying? All the way to the fifth book. And the fifth book will ironically be like, I'm obsessed with it. Like, I'm absolutely obsessed with it. The fifth book I've finished in 3 days. Literally 3 days. And then I'm left with the stack of four other books. And I'm like, what do I do here? Because I feel guilty if I go pick up another fifth book. But I have no interest in reading these four other books. Like, I'm not into it. And there are a lot of opinions over this, okay? So I have consulted family members, loved ones, those close to me about this problem. One of my family members has a strong opinion that you should fight through. If you train yourself to just give up on a book the second that you don't like it, then you're not training yourself to fight through difficult or boring scenarios and you're just looking for that instant gratification. And they said that you should start with the book all the way at the bottom and completely read through it and then work to the next one, to the next one, to the next one until you're all of a sudden back at the most recent book that you picked up. Now, this made sense to me. And I was like, I definitely have kind of a sporadic brain. I'm all over the place. I am definitely like getting things done and accomplishing things, but I guess I'm just having trouble here with the book situation. I like too many books. I'm picking five up at a time. I'm buying 16 at the store. There's just too much is happening. I need to enjoy one book for what it is. So I tried the strategy. Okay, I tried it. All of 2024, I was doing this strategy. And I remember all summer just drudging through this one self help book. And the irony of it was a self help book. It was supposed to inspire me and motivate me to do better and be better and learn all of these things about my mind and my actions. And it was not doing any of that because I was just so bored with the book. And I don't know. Let me back up. Let me talk about this book specifically. And just a disclaimer in this episode, I'm not going to be giving titles of books. I'm not going to tell you specifically the books that I am struggling with or not struggling with. That just feels icky to me. Like, I don't. Not every book is for every person. I'm a very different person than you may be. And I don't want to turn you off on a book. Like, maybe that's. I guess there's arguments against that too. It's like, hey, no, like we want your honest opinion so that we don't waste our time with the book. But I don't know, I just disagree with that. I don't want to put any other authors down. I have seen what it takes to write a book. My mom is an author. Her books I have no problem getting through because they're amazing. But yeah, so I'm not going to be smack talking any of these books. I'm just going to be talking about them generally. So, let me take you back with this book. So, when I started my bachelor's degree, this was like the very first, this was a textbook for one of the very first classes that I was taking. My bachelor's degree was in psychology, and I was very, very excited to be studying psychology, especially after studying computer science and having that background and kind of pivoting into mental health and how the brain works. And I was very, very excited. So, this class, I don't even remember the exact name of the class. I want to say it was positive psychology or something along those lines. So, although this was a textbook, it was actually a self-help book that we were reading throughout the class. And so obviously when I was in the class, I read some of it, but the entire thing was not required reading. So it would be like 3 pages of a chapter here, and then skipping ahead to chapter 9, and now we're reading half of chapter 9, but now we're on chapter 24. So I never read the full book. And so when I was in that class, what I got out of the book, I loved. I was like, wow, this is like super interesting. There's a lot of research here. Like, I'm into it. Fast forward a couple of years later to the summer of 2024. This is the lowest book in my stack. This is the book that I picked up initially and put back down, and then put 4 other books on top of that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start here. It's summertime. I'm going to read this. It's going to be enjoyable. It's going to change my life. It took me forever to finish it. I remember laying out in the sun, like just on the hammock, enjoying the summer day and trying to read this book. And obviously, there were some lines in the book that really got me, that really hit home, that really changed my life. But just overall, it was really reading like a textbook. It was so hard to get through. It was really a struggle, honestly. But I did it. I did it. And I remember the day that I did it, I think it was like 2 months into the summer at this point, and I had 3 chapters left, which felt like a mountain to climb in this book. But I was like, you know what? I don't care. If I spend my entire day finishing this book, I'm finishing this book. And so I did. And I remember when I had like 5 pages left, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Flipping. And I was getting like anxious to like finish the book. I'm like, finally, because I was really just chasing that accomplishment of finally finishing the book. Who cares about the book? Like, I don't even care about what I'm even reading about at this point. I'm just trying to read the words to say that I did it. And I remember when I flipped that last page, I just slapped the book together, whipped it on the ground, and was just like, yes, finally, like, I'm done with that book. And it was almost out of frustration and annoyance and anger. I remember telling someone about this, and I remember them being like, that is so ironic because it was a self-help book that was supposed to make you feel good, and all it did was stress you out. And I was like, yeah, that is so true. And a similar situation happened with a few other books. Obviously, through this journey that I was taking of forcing myself to finish books, there were some home runs. There were books that I absolutely loved and I just read really quickly, and the characters have stayed with me for life. And then there were other books that continued to just take forever to finish, and not all of them were just self-help books. There were a couple of other books that I thought that I was really, really going to like, and then I got into it, and I'm talking like halfway through the book, 3/4 through the book, and it is just dragging. I don't know what's going on. And when you become that invested when you've read that many pages, even if you're not mentally invested, you feel like you owe a duty to finish that book. You feel like there's some big conclusion at the end that's just going to make it all make sense, and you're going to go, oh, it doesn't matter that it just took me 2 months and I hated the entire process of reading this book. This ending makes it all worth it. It makes sense now. I get it. Through a couple of books, that's what I was betting on. And then I got to the end and my jaw just dropped. Like, not in a good way, in a are you serious? I just wasted all of my time for that way? Really? So this has been a dilemma if you can't tell. This is a really a struggle for me. And there are a lot of arguments on both sides. So let's get into both sides. Okay, let's start with the case for finishing every book. There are a few arguments that I have come up with myself and that through doing some research I have also found online. So I'm going to go through them. Number 1, respect for the author's work. This is so true, and this is very true for me as well. Like I said earlier, my mom is an author. She is an amazing author, and I do not struggle through her books at all, but I see the work that goes into creating a book, and I'm sure that that rings true whether I like your book or not. So I see the early mornings and the late nights and the plotting and just all of this work and passion and time that goes into it. So it almost feels disrespectful if you don't give a book a chance. If you've taken the initiative to purchase a book or someone's given you a book and you open it up and either you're a few pages through all the way to halfway through, 3/4 through, it just feels like icky, like it feels disrespectful, like this hard work that someone has done and created, I'm putting down. It's like I'm giving up on that author. I'm giving up on their dream. It it just feels so bad. Like I just feel so bad. I don't know if that makes me really caring for others because at the end of the day, like I still bought the book, you know? They still got paid. I guess that's different if it's like in a library or whatnot, but you get the point. Number 2 is giving the book a fair chance. Now, I have heard this a lot. Some people have a 50-page rule, some people have a 2-chapter rule. And then, obviously, if you go on Goodreads or Reddit and you look up a certain book, you can get a little more information on how long it takes to get into a specific book based on that person's opinion. And so it does feel like you're not giving the book a fair chance if you don't at least give it 50 pages. The problem that I have ran into is that I generally subconsciously follow that rule. So usually, if I'm a couple of pages in and I'm not into it, I'm like, it's okay, it's going to get better. And where I find myself with this struggle is when I'm literally 3/4 through the book and I'm struggling. So, in many people's case, I feel like their argument for putting down the book would actually be, all right, you gave it 50 pages and you're still struggling, put it down. I have not been able to do that yet. Well, we're going to get into that, but we are still on the case for finishing every book. So, number 2, giving the book a fair chance. Sometimes it can feel like giving the book a fair chance actually looks like giving the entire book a chance. Like, what is a fair chance? Is 50 pages really enough? Or should we be finishing the entire thing? Is the ending going to reveal something that blows our mind and makes everything make sense and makes us want to read the book over again? You know? Number 3, completing a story as intended. Let me explain. You start a book. Even if you're not completely engaged with the characters or the plot or the setting or whatever is going on, you've still started a story. You've still sort of stepped into another world, and not completing that story almost leaves an open file in your brain. So, at least for me, and maybe this is some like crazy OCD perfectionist type stuff, but to me, even if I'm not engaged with the characters, but I'm enough into the story, I'm at least that 50 pages in where I understand what's going on, I get the vibe. It feels like I'm abandoning something. Like I'm not completing the story as intended. I haven't fully seen the author's vision. I don't get the full picture. And it almost feels like I have to carry out the story in order to get that full picture. Like some themes and plot twists or character arcs only make sense in full context. And that's what I've been talking about before, where through forcing myself to finish these books, like I'm waiting for this wow ending. I'm just waiting for it. I'm like, make it make sense. But sometimes it doesn't. And then I get to the end of a book and my jaw drops and I'm like, really? I just wasted all that time and energy on a book that after completion literally still makes no sense and I still could care less about it. That's a struggle. That's a struggle bus right there. And number 4, which I touched a little bit on this one before, is Personal growth and discipline. Reading tough books can expand our perspectives and resilience. So, exactly like what my loved one was saying, it's almost like you're taking the easy way out and you're training yourself in life to only take part in things that you absolutely love and that easily sweep you off your feet. And sometimes it's more complicated than that, and you should challenge yourself to read books that aren't as easy to read. All right, so that is all of my points for the case for finishing every book. Just to quickly recap, we have respect for the author's work, giving the book a fair chance, completing a story as intended, and personal growth and discipline. Now let's get into the case for quitting a book, which I'm going to be honest this has been just tugging at me. I don't have an answer, by the way. So if you're waiting for the end of this episode for me to actually give you an answer, I'm going to work through my thoughts on the topic. I still don't know what's right and what's wrong unless I have an epiphany through recording this. So, the case for quitting a book. 1. Life is too short for books you don't enjoy. Why waste time on something unfulfilling? So true. Okay, this is so true because if you actually think about it, we have limited years, days, hours, minutes, seconds on this planet. Why would you willingly choose to waste those on something that is in your control that you don't enjoy? Like, some things truly are not in your control. Some things take a lot more work in order to change. If it's something like, for example, you don't like your job, you can't necessarily just say, "Oh, sorry, okay, bye." Like, I don't like my job today, I'm quitting. Usually it's a lot more complicated than that. You have to put food on the table, you have to support a family. You can't just quit your job just because you don't like it. Boo hoo, you don't like it. Yes, you have the power to change your situation, but that's going to take some time. You're going to have to apply to new jobs. You're going to have to spruce up your resume. You're going to have to go to interviews. You're going to have to navigate a new job, maybe a new commute, new workplace, etc. Okay? You can absolutely change your situation, whatever situation that you're in, but it might take more time. Now, with a book, you can just put it down. You can just close her up, put the book down. It's really not that hard. It doesn't take 7 steps in order to put it away. You just have to mentally decide to do that and be fine with your decision. So ultimately, it is kind of a waste of time. If you have given a book 50 pages, we're just going to go with the 50-page rule. I think that's pretty fair. But if you've given the book at least 50 pages, or in my case, gotten straight up halfway through a book, 3/4 through a book, and you still are not into it, there's probably there's no reason to continue wasting your time when you could be reading a book that you absolutely love, that just you gravitate towards it. You don't even want to look at your phone. You just want to read the book. All of a sudden, the book is in your bag and you're reading it at the doctor's office instead of scrolling on your phone. These are the kind of books that you need in your life. Number 2, reading should bring joy, not obligation. Now, this one kind of ties into number 1, because why waste your time on something that you don't enjoy? But we can go a little deeper here. So, books are supposed to be, generally speaking, for entertainment. Obviously, if you're reading a self-help book or a textbook or something that's more educational, that can be more for studying purposes and bettering your life and things like that. But for the most part, books, novels, stories are supposed to be a form of entertainment, just like you would sit down and watch a TV show or watch a movie. And we have enough chores and obligations already in our lives. Like, we already have to do the laundry in order to have clean clothes, to go to work, to make money, to put food on the table. Like, that's a have to for most people. So why are we going to add in another have to with something that should simply be entertainment? And actually, the more that I think about it right now, I am definitely much more quick to shut off a TV show or shut off a movie if I'm not into it. I mean, I definitely still have this conflict like I do with books, especially with movies. I think, hear me out. With a TV show, if I'm on episode 1 or 2, but there's like 10 seasons ahead of me, number one, that's daunting. If I'm not into the show, that's really daunting to think about 10 more seasons of a show that I am truly not into and not enjoying. And it also feels like there's so much more to it. Like there's so many episodes and so many seasons, and there's just so much going on, and it's like if I'm not into it, I don't really feel bad for giving it up because there was just a lot there that I couldn't invest into. I feel a little differently about movies because usually with movies it's like one and done, unless obviously a series, whatever. Typically with movies, it's 2 hours and I can usually get through 2 hours. You know what I mean? Even if I'm not really into the movie, usually it's entertaining enough and it is what it is, and I think it more easily tricks you into sitting there through something that you're not necessarily initially enjoying because it's not going to go on forever and ever and ever and take up your entire life. It's 2 hours. So anyways, not to go off on a rant about movies and TV shows, that can be another episode. It was just interesting to me that in my mind, I definitely think about them differently, TV shows, movies, compared to books, when in reality, all three are a form of entertainment. So why do I feel so much more obligated to finish a book than I do a TV show, for example? And I feel like that might have something to do with the fact that it's a physical book. Because so for me, so I don't own a Kindle. I have thought about it for, wow, so the wind outside is pretty crazy and I feel like you guys can definitely hear it, but that's all right. Just some background ASMR. Where I live, it's very cold right now. It's winter and there's just a lot of wind and it's like really loud. Anywho, I do think it has to do with the books being physical because I don't own a Kindle. I've thought about getting into the Kindle life. I still may. I see how it would be way easier traveling and going on vacation, for example, instead of packing like two books, you know, the one book that I've almost finished, but I want to finish on the plane, and then the second book that I want to start after that. I think just having one small thin Kindle would be super nice. I haven't gotten into it. So for me specifically, all of my books are physical. And I think there is an aspect where it feels even worse not finishing a book because it's like, what do I do now? I have this literal 2 pound thing in my. 2 pounds? Is that dramatic? I don't even know what a typical book weighs. Well, listen, guys, I've read It by Stephen King. That is definitely like a 5 pound book. But just a regular book, I don't know. I'm gonna have to weigh a book because now I'm curious what a typical book weighs, like 250, 300 pages. Anyways, it's like this physical object that now you're stuck with that you didn't finish. And I've never, okay, listen, I know what you're thinking. Dana, donate the book. I've never done that. Maybe I need to get into donating books. You know what I mean? Like, I've donated many other things. I'm like at the Salvation Army every other day. But there's something about books. It's like they hold knowledge and stories. And I just don't, even if I don't like them, I don't want to get rid of them. Maybe I'm a book hoarder. Maybe that's a thing. Is that a thing? Stop. I'm literally going to look this up right now. Are book hoarders a thing? Wow. Okay, guys, this is Google's AI overview, so please take it with a grain of salt. But it says, yes, people can hoard books, and this is known as a bibliomania or sundoku. I don't know if I pronounced that properly. Bibliomania is a term that describes the act of collecting books to the point of obsession and can be a symptom of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Sundoku is a term that describes the act of buying books but never reading them. Wow. Okay, so maybe I just have bibliomania. Good to know. No, in all seriousness, I don't even have that many books in the grand scheme of things, but I definitely have an attachment to the physical aspect of it. And you know what makes it harder is where the book came from, too. Like if I got a book from Christmas from a loved one, even if they so typically if a loved one buys me a book that they have read before and they vouch for and they know that I'll like it, I usually do love it. But a lot of the time, my family will buy me books that they saw at Target or Barnes and Noble and they looked interesting. And sometimes they really are, but other times they're not. And this is how we get into this dilemma about not finishing books and should I finish the book? And then I have this attachment to not wanting to get rid of it and donate it because it's like, well, my mom bought me that, you know? See where this gets very difficult for me? Okay, bibliomania. That's, I guess, the vibe now for me. Listen, you guys, in a world that spends most of their time on screens, I am all for a healthy escape. Whether that's just stepping away from the screens or getting lost in a good book for a while, we need that break. And if you're looking for that kind of escape, you have got to check out sarahcrownbooks.com. Some people are born storytellers, and let me tell you, Sarah Crown is one of them. From recording her first stories as a child to studying under top Hollywood story experts like John Truby, she has built a life around words, weaving thrilling narratives with depth and heart. With degrees in psychology, education, and law, Sarah brings a unique perspective to her writing, one that grips readers and just doesn't let go. Trust me, her stories are the perfect way to unplug and dive into something unforgettable. Her latest novel, All These Threads of Time, is the perfect blend of heart-pounding suspense and mind-bending time travel. Set in the 80s, when Sylvie Mitchell discovers that she can jump through time, she's determined to save her family from a serial killer. But the past fights back in ways that she would have never expected. If you love mysteries with a twist and time travel that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this book is for you. And if you're looking for more than just stories, Sarah's Substack called A Busy Lady is your backstage pass to her writing journey. She takes you behind the scenes with inspiration, writing tips, and more. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or just someone looking to live a more creative life, A Busy Lady will give you the tools and motivation you need. Don't miss out on Sarah's thrilling books and creative wisdom. Check out sarahcrownbooks.com for more information on her books and Substack. That's sarahcrownbooks.com. In stories, we find ourselves. Back to the case for quitting a book. We have only gotten through number 2. Number 3. Some books just aren't a good fit. Genre, writing style, or themes may not resonate with every reader. This is also so true. Let me give an example with a book that I recently actually did choose to put down. And I'm still on the fence with it because I very recently put it down and I started reading another book, and the other book that I'm now currently reading, I love. I'm obsessed. I'm almost done with it. I literally just started it the other day. I'm almost done with it. But the book that I put down before that was a book that literally a family member bought me for Christmas, and the cover was so cool. The summary of the book was so cool. I was like, yeah, like I'm all about this. And I start reading it, right? And I give it, I'll have to look and see how many chapters I actually got into it. But I definitely hit the 50-page rule. And I get into it, right? And all of a sudden, there's like these little footnotes in the book. This is like a novel. Like, this is completely fiction. But there's footnotes. And it's explaining points in history throughout this fictional book. So I just remember getting genuinely confused. Like, is this an actual fact of history? Or is this just a fact of history in this fictional world? I'm sure I could have literally looked that up. But the whole book, I just wasn't into the book, you know? I wasn't into it. And I looked it up on Goodreads, and there were a lot of comments that had the same opinion that I was starting to naturally form myself. And a lot of them were like, yeah, like none of it really made sense and nothing happens at the end. Like no grand conclusion is come to. It just ends. And so then I really started to get disinterested because my original strategy of hoping and wishing and praying that the ending would just give me this like God Almighty moment where it was like, oh, like this all makes sense. According to the people of Goodreads, that was not happening with this book. So then finally I was like, this is ridiculous. At the end of the day, when I'm getting in bed and I want to go pick up a book to read and eventually fall asleep with, I had no interest in picking up this book. And it's crazy, when I started reading a different book, immediately, like I'm obsessed with this book now. I'm bringing it everywhere. So, yeah, the number 3, some books just aren't a good fit. I think that's a good example for me because specifically with that book that I put down, it was something about the writing and the voice was in like an English act. I don't even know if this is possible. Clearly it's possible, but yeah, it was in like an English accent. I don't even know how to describe. I don't I would literally have to read a page out of the book, but again, I would probably be giving away the book. So, it just was not a good fit for me. And like I said, I just recently put it down, so I'm really not quite sure where I'm going from here because I still feel remorse. I feel bad for putting it down. It's still on my bookshelf. I just got it for Christmas. Christmas was like a month ago. I don't know. Okay, and number 4 is the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you started doesn't mean you must finish. This is actually something very interesting that I discovered through the research that I was doing for this episode, that there is literally something called the sunk cost fallacy. And let me read you Google's AI definition for this. The sunk cost fallacy is a cognitive bias where someone continues to invest time, money, or effort into something that is no longer beneficial simply because they have already invested a significant amount in it, especially, quote unquote, throwing good money after bad, and prioritizing past investments over future potential gains. It means continuing an endeavor even when it would be better to abandon it due to the feeling of having invested too much to quit. Okay, yeah, Google understands me, I guess, because that is so me. So when I pass the 50 pages and I'm now halfway through the book, 3/4 through the book, I completely have this. I'm like, yeah, I should quit, but I've invested way too much. I've spent hours reading this book. I'm 300 pages in. There's only 150 pages left. Do the math. Like, I've done 300. There's 150 pages left. If I could get through 300 pages of this, I can get through another 150. Even though I'm suffering through it, I should do that because I deserve to suffer because this book deserves to be read. I don't know. This is so psychotic. I can't believe this is a genuine problem in my life. Thank you guys for being here for me. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Like, I'm so sure that I'm not the only one who has this problem, especially for heavy readers or book lovers. And I wouldn't even consider myself a heavy reader because I'm so busy all the time. Like, I can't just be reading all the time, but I really enjoy a good book. So, all right, just to recap the points for the case for quitting a book. Number 1, life is too short for books you don't enjoy. Number 2, reading should bring joy, not obligation. 3, some books just aren't a good fit. 4, the sunk cost fallacy. All right, now let's get into some ethical considerations. First, library versus purchased books. Is there a difference in obligation if you paid for the book? In my heart and soul, I say yes. Because, again, almost going back to that sunk cost fallacy, if you've purchased a book, now you have not only invested time into reading part of it, but also money into purchasing it. And books are not cheap nowadays. Like, what's going on out here with these $25 books? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening? It's not even hardcover. You know what I mean? But, yeah, I haven't checked out a book from the library since I was a kid. So maybe I need to get more into that. But I don't know. That could be a whole that could literally be a whole other episode because I love having my own books. Does that make sense? So, if I read a book and I love it, that book is like an old friend to me. Like, I want to have that book forever. I want to highlight my favorite sentences out of that book. I want to flip through that book. I want to read that book again. I want that book to sit on my shelf, and every time I look at it, I want to think about the characters and the life that I lived through reading that book, you know? I don't want to give that book back to the library. And there's something about it's like a risk. It's like the risk you have to take because I feel like some people could argue with me and be like, well, if you check out a book from the library and you love it that much, then you can just buy your own copy. And now it's like you've test ran it, you've given it a trial run with the library's copy, and now you know you love it. So now buy your own copy. But now, if I read the book at the library, I love the book, I go and I buy my own copy, right? It's like I haven't read that copy, so it's not worn in. Does that make any sense? I'm kind of starting to feel crazy the more that I explain this. Help. All right, so library versus purchase books. Is there a difference in obligation if you paid for the book? I just feel like yes, because going back to everything that we've talked about today, if you've paid for a book, there feels like more of an obligation. If I just take a book out from the library, it's like no shame. I just give it back to the librarian, and the book still gets some love. It will be checked out by someone else, they will like it or hate it, and they will ultimately bring it back at whatever point in time, and it will just keep getting recycled. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. It's okay. I was just one of the people who didn't like it. Yeah, maybe I just need to go get a library card, literally. I don't know. This is a dilemma. All right, another ethical consideration. DNF culture in the book community. If you don't know what DNF means, it means did not finish. This is a huge phrase used in the readers community. You'll see people on Goodreads or on Reddit or wherever just saying, yeah, I DNF'd the book. Like it's almost become its own word, like to DNF something. When I first started getting to this dilemma and I started doing some research on it, I was astounded to see how many people DNF books. Like it was like no problem. Like, yeah, just DNF that. Like, don't waste your time with that one. DNF, DNF, DNF. Like, no problem. And to me, I was like, wow, you guys are reckless out here. You guys are giving books 20 pages and you are just doing this thing called DNF and calling it a day. You're moving on. Like, we're not waiting here. It was just, yeah, it was kind of eye-opening and still felt a little scary. But I think generally in the book culture, DNFing is widely accepted. But I think with certain exceptions, I think that there are certain books that majority of people love. Like I'm talking classics. I'm talking very, very popular books. Generally speaking, like majority rules. Like if most people have read this book and then reported back that they absolutely loved it, and then you're the outlier and you come in and you're like, yeah, I DNF'd that one. Everyone's gonna hate you. I don't even know who everyone is, you know what I mean? Like, what is someone on Reddit really gonna do to you? But just generally speaking, that's the vibe that I get. And again, I'm really not very active in the readers community. I'll look up a book, I'll look up reviews sometimes. Usually I like to go into books blind without looking up reviews because I don't want to be swayed one way or another. But like I said, if I'm in the middle of a book and I'm struggling, maybe I'll look it up, see if there's hope at the end. It just seems like DNFing is accepted in the book community, which is very, very interesting to me. I think what's important in this entire dilemma, crisis, whatever you want to call it, is to find a middle ground. What I'm realizing through talking through all of this is that there has to be a balance, and I guess it depends on who you are and your different values and how you deeply feel about this. Clearly, I have been very torn and very conflicted and spent all of 2024 forcing myself to finish books that I didn't love. And starting off 2025 sort of strong, I have already DNF'd one book, which I am pretty firm in my decision about doing, and am very happy with the book that I'm reading right now. But I think what's important is to set some ground rules. So, for example, a page limit rule. I think that that is something I need in my life. I've always known about the general 50-page rule. I've never really actually used the 50-page rule. I think I've just always found myself in the middle to three-quarters of a book realizing that I'm not happy. Like I knew the entire book that I wasn't happy, but it gets to that point where I start rethinking everything. Like what am I really doing here? And at that point, I'm usually like 150 to 200 pages into a book. That is a lot further than 50 pages. So, maybe for me personally, it's a 100-page rule because I guess I just naturally like to give books way more of a chance than they sometimes even deserve. So, definitely a page limit rule. And then I think, honestly, at that point, acceptance. You know, if you hit the page limit rule and you are really not jiving with the book, then just accept it. If it's at the point where, you know, you're really sad about putting the book down, like maybe you don't absolutely love it, but you're really curious about what happens on page 103, then maybe you keep reading. Maybe that's a sign. Maybe that's a sign that there's something there for you. I think you have to be very intuitive with it, but definitely set some of these ground rules like a page limit. I think another thing to consider is, are you going to skip to the end, or are you just going to completely quit it, never look at the book again, call it a day, donate it, it's all over? I think this might be a case by case basis, depending on how much you hated your 50-page experience. But generally speaking, it might not be a bad thing to look up what happens in the book. I don't know. I've actually never done it because personally, I feel like I don't deserve doing it. This is so crazy. The more that I talk about it, the more crazy I feel like it sounds, but hear me out. Just hear me out. So I feel like if I am whatever 150 pages in and I'm not driving with the book and I just get so fed up that I close it, I put it on the shelf, I'm done with it. I still feel like I don't deserve to look up how the book ended because I still feel like one day I will finish that book. One day I will finish what I started and I will give that book a chance. And if I look it up now, I'm just going to completely ruin that for myself. And also, because I wasn't willing to put in the hard work of reading every single word on every single page of that book, it's like I don't deserve to finish it. Does that make any sense? Please let me know if I'm just losing my mind or not. But that's the way that I'm psychologically thinking about it. So that's me. However, I think I would be open to maybe trying that out with one book, like the next book that I start reading that I'm not in love with, give myself permission to look up the ending and see how it makes me feel. Do I feel icky? Am I sad that I didn't traditionally read through the actual book instead of like cheating, if you will? I don't know. But I think that is something to consider in one of your ground rules if you're going to put some ground rules together. Have a page limit, figure out what you're going to do when you don't like a book. Are you going to skip to the end, look up a summary, figure out what happened, or are you just going to completely leave it in the past, donate it, never think about it again? And the last thing is being honest about why you quit. I think that, as we've covered today, there are a lot of different reasons for quitting a book. Sometimes it is just personal taste, and someone else might completely love that book. It just wasn't for you. In other cases, sometimes the book is just really bad. Like there's typos everywhere, it doesn't even make sense, there's 500 characters, we don't know anything about any of them. Like sometimes it's just probably not working for anyone. And I think that being honest about that can kind of give you some reassurance and some clarity in why you made the decision that you made and why you are maybe happier putting that book down and picking something up that you love or Well, I guess you really never know if you're going to love a book. It's like playing Russian roulette every time I pick up a book at least. It's like, oh, am I going to love it or am I going to hate it? And it's a joy. It's an absolute joy when I pick a book and it just sweeps me away and it just takes me into a world and I learn so much and I resonate with the characters and it's an absolute joy. And it is so painful when I pick up a book and I realize that I'm struggling through it. It's it's hard. Definitely. All right, guys, that's all I have today. Please let me know what your thoughts are on this dilemma. Do you think that it is morally okay to not finish a book and put it away and never look at it again? Should I start donating my books that I don't like? Should I get a library card? Like, what's the vibe? You gotta help me out here. If you're interested in staying up to date on the podcast, you can follow me at the Lot of It podcast on Instagram. There's also a YouTube channel for this podcast. All episodes will be up on YouTube, which is the Lot of It podcast on YouTube. And I am so excited to talk to you guys next time. Have a beautiful rest of your day.